So if I just gave you the slope and the y-intercept, we had this when we first started talking about slope-intercept form. If I gave you the slope and the y-intercept and asked you to write an equation, it was very easy. You could just say y equals, put a number in for the m, x, put a number in for the b. But now we're going to have something where we know a point and we know the slope, but the point we know is not the y-intercept. So we could, if you already know about point-slope form, you could use point-slope form. If you don't know about point-slope form, I'm not going to talk about that. So I'm happy to confirm with you, but for most people, it's just an added thing that they don't use often. So we can plug in the things that we know. When we look at y equals mx plus b, there are basically 4 different things there. Usually we only have numbers in our final answer in the equation. There are only numbers for the m, the slope, and the b, the y-intercept. But if we know a point, then we know an x and a y that makes this equation true. So I've done a little color coding there. I will not do that on every problem because that would take me days. But the 4 is an x, the 1 is a y, the slope, that's m. We need the b. To write the rule, to write the equation, we need to find b. So if I plug in the x and y that I know works to y equals mx plus b, so then I just wrote 1 under the, I would say at first write y equals mx plus b every time. Just write it, and then under each letter you put in what you have. So here, the 1 was the y, equals, the slope is 2, so m is 2. The 4 is the x. We don't know b. By the way, you're welcome to use lowercase, but mine looks too much like a 6, so I just avoid it. Then I do 2 times 4, that's 8, and then I've got to get the b by itself. Oh, actually, this is negative 7. That's what I get for doing things too fast. So to get b by itself, I would have to subtract 8 on both sides. Just ran myself out of space, though. So I got b is negative 7. And then the final answer is the equation in slope-intercept form. So finding the b is the hard part, but don't stop there because it's not just asking you to find the y-intercept. So I would start off writing y equals mx plus b. And the y in this pair is 4. So 4 is going to replace that y. Equal, m stands for slope, and here the m is 1/2. X, in this case, in this pair, this is x and y, the x is 2. You can use a dot in between, you can use parentheses, but those two are being multiplied, and we don't know b. That's what we're going to try to figure out. So 1/2 times 2. Half of 2 is 1. If you're not comfortable with the fractions, that ABC button on the calculator might be your friend. And then I need to get the b by itself, so I'd have to take away 1. Or I might just be able to look at that and know that 1 plus 3 is 4. So sure enough, b is equal to 3. And then after I know b, then I write my equation. When I write my equation, I go back to just using x and y, not the actual point. I use a number for m and a number for b, but now I have a rule or a function that I could use for any x and y that lie on that exact same line, that lie on that same line. So we're finding the y-intercept, and then we can write the equation. But to write the equation, we need to know the slope, and we need to know the y-intercept, because we need numbers in that m and b position. Now, I will say if you notice that your point happens to have a 0 in the x, okay? Only in the x. So if the point is 0 and then some number, this number is the b. Because remember, the y-intercept has a 0 for x. So a problem like number 6, I could plug in and find it, but I could also just look at this and know the slope is 4 and the y-intercept is -9. That shortcut only works because this has a 0 in the x. Because if it's at 0, -9, that is on the y-axis. That is the y-intercept. Most of the time we don't get that lucky. So number 3, I have a 0, but it is not in the right place. So I'm going to use my formula. I'm going to write down y equals mx plus b. I'm going to plug everything in. So I know this is an x and a y, and I know that slope is m. So I have 0 is equal to 2/3 times -6 plus b. So 2/3 times -6. That means I'm multiplying 2 times -6 and I'm dividing it by 3. So that gives me -4 plus b. I need to get b by itself, so I'll add 4. Or you might be able to just see it since it's just one step. But b is 4. And then I write my equation. When I write my equation, maybe I'm not going to write it up there. I'm going to write it down here where I have more space. Y is equal to 2/3 x plus 4. So I already know this equation for number 4 is going to say y equals -3/4 x. I just need to do the work to find the rest of it. Some of you might find you could kind of do it in your head and figure out it's like the b is like the adding and subtracting step to make the answer equal to -1. So we'll always work to write down y equals mx plus b, plug things in. So what is my y in number 4? Which number am I given is a y? -1. What is my m? -3/4. What is my x? And we don't know b. There's got to be something we don't know or we wouldn't have to do this. So now we'll multiply the m and the b. So -3/4 times -8 will be +6. Still equals -1. Still have plus b. Then I would have to get rid of the 6. Subtract 6. So I have -7 is equal to b. So then what goes out there? -7. So now if I used x, the -8, as the input and put it in, I should be able to do -3/4 times -8, subtract 7, and get -1. Like I could check that on my calculator. Let's turn the page and let's see. I see one that has a slope of 0. That's something a little bit different. We've also had mostly fractions. So let's look at one where we actually have a whole number as the slope. So I'll start there with number 8. So once again, I'm going to write down my slope-intercept form, Just gives me a nice framework to plug things into. I don't have to worry about forgetting what goes where. I'm just kind of replacing things underneath. And then negative 3 times 3 is negative 9. To get rid of negative 9, we'd have to add 9. So negative 8 plus 9 is 1. So then I would say y equals negative 3x plus 1. And then I could, since this one doesn't have a fraction, I can kind of check it quickly. Negative 3 times 3 is negative 9. Negative 9 plus 1 is negative 8. It works. So whatever the given slope is, that's going to be in your equation in front of your x. Before we do any work, we should at least already know this part of the equation. Let's see, go to number 11. I guess we already had one that had a fraction and a negative. Remember that two negatives do make a positive. So if you see, for example, in number 11, when you're multiplying m and x, don't leave off the negative sign. You can think of it being with the 4 or the 3. I usually kind of attach it to the top number. But you do need to think about that being negative. So negative 1 is equal to negative 4 over 3. And that's usually what I'll do, is just write it that way so I don't forget about it over there. So negative 4 times negative 6 is positive 24. Divided by 3 is 8. And then I'd have to subtract the 8 to get the b by itself. Negative 1 subtract 8 would be negative 9 for b. And then there's my equation. So for 13, I'm going to work it out, and then I want you to tell me if you can think of a way that maybe there's a little bit of a shortcut or something that perhaps you might recognize. So y is negative 4, m is 0, and x is 3. So what is 0 times 3? 0. And what is 0 plus b? Or like this is just then b is negative 4, right? I don't really need to have a step where I take 0 away from both sides. In fact, when I see that 0 times 3 is 0, I could just have gone straight to b is negative 4. And then this would look like this. But then what is the most simple way to write that? If I have 0x.
X minus 4?
Not x minus 4.
Or y equals x minus 4?
Nope, not y equals x minus 4. Y equals negative 4. Now, is there any way that maybe I could have come up with that sooner or more quickly?
So y is,
Because the y in the point is negative 4, right?
and then the slope is 0.
So if the slope is 0, we know it's a horizontal line. And horizontal lines only have y equals some number. So there's nothing wrong with going through the steps to get there. But sometimes if we recognize, oh, the slope is 0, that means it has to be just y equals some number, because the 0 times x. And then whatever the y is in your point, then it's just y equals negative 4. See? You're a ninja. Okay, so besides your IXL lessons and your paper you just did, there is a homework on 48. You're going to do all 10 of those. Okay, there's no backside. So not evens, but there's no backside. So you have 10 questions like what we just did. The final answer